Hello, it's Brad Laurie, or BlockchainBrad, and today I'm honoured to speak with the co-founder of Cocos-BCX. He's here using his evening to make time to speak with me exclusively about all the updates that Cocos-BCX have been doing of late and to let you know about key developments. So Richard, firstly, thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you so much for your time, Brad. It's always a pleasure.
You're welcome, mate. Now, I also need to give thanks to you, and I need to be completely transparent to all the listeners. This video is sponsored, and I want to explain why. Essentially, at times when we are doing this kind of work, there's a need to eat, there's a need to live and pay rent. So for that reason, I've decided to reach out to Cocos-BCX and ask if they would help out with a small donation or a small sponsorship, and they've done that. So I'd like to acknowledge that to all of you, and I'd like to also thank you, Cocos-BCX, for doing so. Now, Rich, let's get into the objective aim of this interview, and that is to really unpack what you've been doing lately and see, just how much you've developed from the last time we spoke. Let's start with the premise, though, and the why. Why do we need to have this blockchain gaming platform emerge as, a leading system for the future? And why do we even need blockchain?
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a big question. So first of all, Cocos BlockChain Expedition aims to build a full stack solution for blockchain games and game economies. Mm-hmm. By full stack solution, we mean we provide a public chain using DPoS mechanism, and all the witnesses share the same scheduled block generation probability to ensure consistency and fairness. We also have created our own token standard, which is called the NHAS 1808. Mm-hmm. It supports complicated items and the game economies. We also provide the visual digitized IDE, which is called Cocos Creator. It is a heritage from the Cocos 2DX era, where 1.3 million developers in the world are using that. Mm-hmm. So as a result, there are some features for our project. For example, our data structure and technology are game-centric. We provide multi-chain interoperability in the future, and we also have asset contract compartmentalization, use of light nodes, and many more other features. Mm-hmm. And we integrated runtime environment for games.
Right. Well, Rich, let's explore this though in the context of the development from the 2DX, from that vast user base and the well-known technology that did exist before. You've now morphed into a blockchain archetype and framework. Rich, why did you need to do that? Why not just use the 2DX framework? Why not just use what was already working? Why do you think that it's beneficial to transition into a blockchain-based system?
So we believe some of the games are naturally fit for the blockchain economy mechanism. For example, when we talk about decentralized assets, the key feature is that they can provide a long-term value proposition to the players. So many of the game genres, such as simulation games, card games, they do have a very long life cycle. In this long life cycle, we believe a lot of the fun experience should be carried on and can be carried on by using digital assets. So those are the very reason we started doing this 2 years ago.
Right. And Rich, as you'd be aware, you're not the first to try and experiment with the blockchain, especially tokenized systems. And certainly even prior to blockchain itself, there was experimentation with, tokens that had monetary value and were regarded as assets via gaming platforms. So what have you learned? What have you observed from those that have already emerged utilizing blockchain, and what sets you apart from them as we start to really push forward in what blockchain gaming can do?
Yes. Well, there are so many great peer projects in this area, blockchain gaming, trying to solve problems from different angles. For example, we have a lot of partnerships with some of the blockchain system providers, with some of the feature providers, layer 2, layer 3, layer 1. Mm-hmm. But we believe today, the key issue that we identified is that people have to have a learning curve today. It means developers have to have a very simple tool to either convert their conventional games to blockchain games or to build new blockchain games. Mm. At the same time, they really need the guidance in terms of what kind of game should be the easy one or early ones to really attract the users. On the other hand, of course, like users and other industrial stakeholders, they also need to learn under this new economic paradigm what they should be doing or what's to their best interest to play this game. So for example, many of the games today are trying to provide a crypto experience. They require the users to register for like wallets or even remember different words. But as a matter of fact, the players don't come to a game for that. So our idea is that if we can make an introductory phase in every game, of course, depending on what the kind of the games, that we can actually give this pathway for the users to convert from a player to a digital asset holder. It should be natural. For example, before their digital assets reach to a certain amount of value, they shouldn't be able to be asked to register any wallet. So this is something that we try to solve. Another angle would be we provide all the ready-to-use tools for the developers and players to do that.
Okay, so if we do the comparison, for example, with pre-existing tokenized models, you've seen them in the gaming industry, where we've seen the likes of significant users interacting in a very robust ecosystem where they can essentially purchase on the gaming platform itself. Now, I would imagine that in your ecosystem, with all the different games that will onboard onto the platform, that will also be the case with the tokens. But what's the fundamental difference beyond that trade, beyond that ability to interact, that really sets blockchain apart from pre-existing models?
Yeah, that's a very deep question. I would say in general, it's more than tokenization and it's more complicated than tokenization. Let's talk about more than tokenization. Well, actually, the in-game economy is just like a copy of the real-life economy. It involves many things. For example, when we talk about tokenization, we usually talk about the title or the ownership. However, in the traditional economy, we know anything is valuable because they're limited supply. So on the blockchain, we believe, which is the third stage that we define in our white paper about blockchain gaming, is that the generation algorithm or the generation rationale should be recorded and validated on chain as well. That actually limits the supply, and of course, with the demand, this thing eventually becomes an asset. Another thing, another thing would be, for example, in the real life, we just don't trade things. We also borrow things. We also lend things. We even like collateralize things. So those are the features that we are already supporting now by our token standard NHAS 1808. And behind that is a very complicated and a series of tools that we need to give the developers to actually apply those things. So that's why we're proposing it's more than tokenization, and it's more complicated than that.
Absolutely. Now, Rich, let's talk about that suite of tools as well, because when someone goes as a user or someone keen to interact in the gaming platform that you're going to be offering, they're not necessarily going to know about blockchain. They're not going to want to know about blockchain potentially, and they're not perhaps going to need to know about blockchain. But because this is nascent, because you're building out this ecosystem, we as those who are very early need to know that you have the tools and you have the whole framework underneath ready to go, so that it is efficient, it is scalable, and it is fast. Talk us through what you've created, what you've updated, and what you developed, so that we can trust that the seamlessness can follow with the users of the future.
Well, we're building a development environment with gaming experience and gaming economics in mind. So game developers can easily migrate conventional games to blockchain without the need to learn blockchain programming languages. And developers may also use the functions and components provided by Cocos-BCX or any third-party teams to build game economy infrastructure. Non-fungible tokens, of course, exchanges, pawn shops, banks, and we try to just make more games available to players.
Got it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, how much have you progressed in terms of developers onboarding, utilizing the standards, utilizing the NFTs, utilizing the protocol, and also the programming languages? How successful have you been to attract and garner the support of the devs that ultimately drive the success of your platform?
So just to briefly introduce what we have done over the past almost 2 years. So we started in October 2 years ago. In the first quarter of 2018, we launched our full prototype Night. And in the second quarter of this year, we launched the testnet 1.0, named the Garamboche, which is the holy mountain in Tibet.
Right.
We had a series of updates after that. And so far, we have the full version of Mainnet 1.0 ready. We're going to launch it in probably 2 months. And also, we're going to integrate a lot of analytical tools to the terminal and Mainnet in Q3, and develop the gateway for non-homogeneous assets exchange and cross-chain enablement. So those are the key objectives we're aiming at.
Okay, now there's a lot in that roadmap. I remember we were talking about Garamboche last time with the analogies of the mountains that are in that region. But I wanted to try and understand more about the developers though, because they are so key to your ecosystem. Can you give us some sort of understanding of the proof of the development with regard to games that are now being built? Because a lot of people perhaps aren't aware of the kinds of inner workings or the back end support. You would be privy to much of the pipeline also of games that are now being built. So give us a bit of an understanding of the engineering, the coding, the development that's actually happening, and where is the majority of this happening? Is it in Asia, or is it just globally, given that you are essentially a decentralized ecosystem?
Right now, we're having interest from the global developers. With some of the developers had worked with our team members for many years, actually. So right now, our whole code, not whole, but part of our code has been already open sourced on GitHub. So you guys are very welcome to come to our GitHub and help us to make it better. And for developers, actually, they don't really need to care about the blockchain part, because we have the Cocos Creator fully integrated all the blockchain features already. So for established or experienced developer, they can just simply use the Cocos Creator and build a blockchain game. And we actually right now we have 4 sample games online, all in the developer section of our official website, Cocos-BCX.io. And also we have probably 19 to 20 games coming up in the next few months. Okay.
Now, given that you've built your own games as essentially pilot systems or as a showcase for what can be done on the platform, what's your opinion of the argument that perhaps the centralized parties, those entities now that represent the gaming industry, they already have a huge market share. Many of them perhaps aren't looking into blockchain, and obviously you are. Why should they be paying attention? Why should they be concerned perhaps, because you are entering into this market and really changing the game when it comes to the possibilities of a scalable blockchain-based game that can match potentially what they already have?
I think the gaming industry is quite relaxed and fun in terms of competition and concentration. Unlike some of other industries, the top companies become big ones by entertaining people. So I think they are less concerned about being challenged, but more interested how to remain competitive. So as we discussed earlier in this conversation, since the decentralized mechanism, economic mechanism, they can totally improve the experience of some genres of games. So this is something that they should look into. I always want to cite this example of Magic the Gathering. This company made millions of dollars over like 30 years, but their mobile game was successful, but not that greatly successful, because when we face some digital items, we don't really know how to validate that compared to the value we pay for.
Right.
So if we look at those top cards on Amazon traded at $30,000 US, we know that blockchain somehow can be applied to those type of games, again, that provides a long-term value to the players and becomes an asset.
I see. So in the sense of the fact that you're based on gaming, and we've heard this term digital asset before over and over in different startups and through different verticals, do you agree that in many instances in this very convoluted space that perhaps that term's been overused because there's not enough empirical proof that all of these verticals that are emerging actually need a token? And in that respect also, Richard, are you very confident that it's accurate in your case? Because once again, we already see very built out ecosystems. We've seen evidence of token-like models already working in gaming. Do you think that it is right on the money, right on that mark when it comes to being a real digital asset for your vertical as opposed to others?
Absolutely, because by applying a digital token or like crypto token into gaming, not only for Cocos BCX, but for all the projects in this space, it makes a lot of sense. Because when we talk about gaming, the whole like industry value chain is online, it's digital. Like developers create digital content and then trade it and it becomes an asset. Users are using them online and eventually they can also dispose that. So any token, instead of just being a circulating media, they can be the pricing media, or they can be the pricing factor of this whole chain, starting from the very beginning and all the way until to the very end. Right. So this is something when we, for example, using any tokens to track physical goods, there will be a conversion somehow connecting the digital world and the physical world. So I think that will be a big challenge for those projects. But again, when those challenges are overcome, that would be a really big value. But Absolutely. For gaming, we're talking about 130 billion US dollars market a year again, and it increases by probably a high single digit every year. Right. If we think like 30 to 50% of the games that provides long-term values, for example, either it's a copyrighted, very popular content-driven series, or it's just a single game that can last for 10 years. So we know this is like tokenization or blockchain economy in gaming is not a hot air. Okay. It makes sense.
Right. Now, Richard, given that you're the platform for the onboarding of all these games, is it fair to say that many of the games can have their own token models? And if that's the case, where is the true, can you explicate a bit more about the nature of the digital asset for the Cocos BCX system, if you're also going to potentially support other tokenized models and tokenized ecosystems within their own game? The question then becomes, if they have their assets, will it become too convoluted? Will it become too complex? Are you thinking about this? And once again, what is the role specifically of your token, given that you're the fuel for the whole thing?
Yeah, those are very good two questions I would answer. Number one is that we think this game economy, or let's just say like digital economy, is really similar to the real world. I mean, every country has their currencies that reflects their own GDP or their economic reality. By productivity, we're talking about, for example, manpower, resource, same on different blockchains. So it makes sense for people to trade what they're really good at instead of just like closing ourselves down, right? And also, Cocos BCX aims to be a more fungible or like widely used token because again, we support developers when they created the asset.
Exactly.
By the moment they create it and price it, that's actually the beginning of everything.
So is it fair to say in that context that your utility token itself is fungible by design, but you've also built in standards for the NFTs to emerge for the gaming for the developers?
Yes, we actually encourage developers to build their own microeconomy. Absolutely, that only makes this whole ecosystem more robust.
Right. So can you talk us through NFTs in the context of gaming? Why is that so important for them? And what does it actually do for those who aren't aware of the difference between fungibility and non-fungibility?
Yeah, well, I think NFT, again, is a user experience beyond the numerics. Absolutely. And our understanding to NFTs would be, number one, it should be like any physical item that can be freely traded and exchanged. And number two, it should reflect the asset properties, basically, again, ownership and supply and demand, limited generation algorithm. So to do that, well, we actually have a lot of customized features for our NHAS 1808. For example, we make the data structure more complicated. One item can have some general properties, which is like the item has in every application or every game, and they can have some application-specific properties. In game A, they probably they are in blue. In game B, they can be in red. But they can also reset those application specific properties. So a lot of the features are just to facilitate these kind of assets to be like more fungible and circular among different game economies.
Right, and also it consolidates the whole very point of the asset, because it creates some sort of a finite point of value, so that once again there's trust inbound in that asset when it is traded, as opposed to what we see currently, which is a highly speculative crypto environment. Now, in that context, are you at all concerned about the volatility of the current climate? Are you concerned about the constant flux, especially with regard to your own token model?
Well, actually, I'm not concerned, but I think it's the problem we're trying to solve. The reason why the overall volatility is not growing so fast as many people would expect is because we haven't really seen a popular, for example, blockchain game that goes into those conventional gaming community.
Right.
So I think that's some of the challenges we're taking, and that's the game. Yes.
Right. Now, BTC or Bitcoin's been around for a decade, so, and obviously blockchain's preceded that with its own existence and developments. So, Rich, why has it taken so long for these experimentations, and how can we know for sure that mass adoption is achievable when we haven't really seen the empirical proof yet? And if you're going to be leading the way, can you tell us a bit of the indicators, a bit of the evidence that you've already seen perhaps in-house, or even outside of that scope, with some of the trials, some of the pilots, and some of the proof?
Yeah, for general crypto world, I think we as users, or like potential users, are consistently challenged by from many angles from the real world. For example, the 2009 economic crisis, and also probably we are going to have some upcoming economic crisis again. Those are the tests that we're going to take. What kind of value propositions we believe, and what are the media we're going to hold on to. And specifically for gaming, it was a little bit implicit, I would say, to understand. But as a matter of fact, the user behavior and psychology are always been there. Again, people trade on Amazon for those valuables. Right now, it's just it was like 20 years ago when people were playing physical cards, but right now people playing digital. So this is the inevitable trend that we can see. And in the next 5 to 10 years, well, we would expect a very significant progress on that matter.
Right, and obviously it's longitudinal in that sense. But with regard to mainstream collaborations, partnerships, and just the work you've been doing, can you give us a bit of an understanding of how you're bridging the crypto plan, the blockchain focus, and then the real world gaming economy that already exists, so that essentially you could potentially transform the current marketplace and also capture a significant market share by these partnerships?
Well, again, I would say we try to help everyone build a learning curve at the early stage. By building learning curve, we also mean we actually believe in the creativity of people. All they need is some simple explanation and some samples. We have seen remarkable progress since last year. and how sophisticated those developers, can do in terms of developing blockchain games. I think by bridging this crypto world and the gaming world, we're being a translator, and we have a set of tools to help everybody try to understand each other. And eventually, the goal is that, again, the developers and users, they don't really feel the existence of the blockchain. It's just a set of API they use, and users later find out, okay, the things I got in the game actually worth some money, but on the other end of the trade, that they actually spend a lot of time and maybe some fiat money and their privacy data and personal data. And developers really care about, okay, well, this is some really complicated distributed system programming I have to learn, but I got a fair cut on every item I created in this game, or I can be profitable from the popularity of whatever content I create. So that will be the goal in the future.
Right. Now, with enterprises, mainstream entities, let's bring some of those names back. We discussed with some of them last time, but in the context of developments since that time, how important has it been to onboard those enterprises, those companies, to really support what you're doing, and also give it some sort of light and attention in the gaming industry itself?
Well, actually, we're working on multiple lines. For example, for the big institutions, let's just say the negative side would be they have bigger opportunity cost. If they have a really good game, they would consider, of course, number one would be compliance, and number two, should I launch it on blockchain or I do it in a traditional way? What are the payoffs of trying either? But on the bright side is they're very experienced in entertaining people. They know how to make awesome content. So we have a lot of partnerships with them, especially in Europe and Japan, that they have been working with my partner Haju Chen's company, one of the leading publishers in China, for like 10 years.
Okay.
On the other hand, we're encouraging a lot of the small games and small game developing teams. Because if you look back in the internet time and also the mobile internet time, all the gaming industry started as small, simple games, or even very classic old games. They just simply migrated to another technology platform. But that would help this industry gain a lot of popularity quickly. So that's also something we're gonna do. If we look at the 4 sample games, they're kind of like classic games, like Slither, they're like shooting games. So we do try to encourage the developers to have a very low cost.
Right, okay.
To play their first blockchain games.
Got it. Now, you mentioned that the token itself is the fuel for everything. Recently, you've listed on Binance, and obviously I noticed there's one other exchange in CoinMarketCap that we can talk about as well. And I would also imagine that there are other exchanges coming in the future, just simply because you've just listed. But you know, in the context of volume, in the context of brand, in the context of just sheer attention, you've captured, you know, a partnership essentially with one of the biggest of all exchanges. What's it like to start with Binance, and talk us through the reasoning behind it?
Well, we do think in this crypto world, if we want to do games, it's very critical for us to have access to the users. So in terms of like where people can get our tokens, absolutely the top exchanges would be one of the preferred interface. And of course, we're going to promote our games as well. So I think we really appreciate and we really respect the work with Binance. We're really happy that they have a quite high moral standard in terms of market regulation.
Mhm.
So they're a very proud partner to be worked with.
Okay, now obviously it's difficult having this conversation because you can't talk about price, and I'm going to try and dig as much as I can around the issue of the listing and the fact that your token's on the market. Now, the price itself obviously has been reasonably volatile since you're listed, but are you confident that there is a correlation between the token value and your ecosystem? Because as I alluded to before, we haven't seen evidence of that in all instances, Rich, with other verticals, with other startups. In many instances, we've seen, for example, 2017 waves of projects that have just simply declined over time, and many of them have just moved to naught, or they just moved out of the system because they're now defunct or non-operational. Are you very confident that you have something different? You have a different narrative, and you have a token that can start to really showcase the real business that you can do?
Well, I think we're trying to reach where we're aiming. That's all I can say, because different projects have different communities and different expectations. Some of the projects, they try to solve a very specific question and they solve it really well. And those technology questions will take a longer term, and they have a probably higher cost of understanding for the supporters to actually find out the value. So I'm personally not surprised that I see some fluctuations on those kind of projects, ups and downs, because people, like, they have to understand the technology. They need to understand the economic value, or, like, let's say, commercial value of that. But for us, I think our deliverables are ready to use game developing tools. If we're not doing that right, developers would complain, or just like leave, right? And as a result, there will be games. There will be games growing on our platform. So I think we would approve, or we aim to give visible proof, so people can really see what we're doing. We're not solving a single point problem. So that's something I wouldn't say I'm confident to any price. But number one, I think we're definitely gonna do our best, because it's something our team has been doing for like 10 years.
Right. Because obviously I raised that because of the correlation question. It has to come up every time, because once again, we haven't always seen that evidenced in the past. In fact, there's been a lot of questions raised as to whether or not many of those initial startups were just fundraising and utilizing the coin to do so, never actually moved into true proof of utility. So are you saying that right from the beginning, yours is first and foremost a utility model, and this is all designed to support that as you continue moving forward in the trajectory of more business, more revenue, and most importantly, more games onboarded on the platform?
Well, honestly speaking, I wouldn't say we are an innovator in terms of the model, but we're definitely the most focused one. Our goal is very, very simple. We just help developers to easily develop blockchain games for this first stage at a very low cost. So every technology development of ours will be focused on that. For example, the 1.0 testnet Ganren is based on debug. But in the next 12 months, if we find out there's some new alternatives that can better facilitate blockchain games, we would just give up Ganren and go for that, definitely. But we're building this whole environment so the economy can run up. So that's something I think we're having a different angle to our peers.
Right. Okay. Now, with regard to updates on testing, I mentioned before about scalability. Have you got any proof that we can see, whether that be through some sort of open sourced opportunity to engage in the technology, to ensure that you have the necessary capacity, the necessary components to be able to compete with mainstream gaming, so we know that you're not going to lag? We know that that finality is going to be there, and we know that scalability is going to be sufficient to have seamless interaction when we're playing games.
Well, let me just cite a couple of numbers during our testing. First of all, our pressure test reads out a 5,100 per second transaction. Given a hybrid structure, we think that's a pretty good start for gaming. And number two is that we had about 300,000 registered users. They register accounts, and they come out and they come up to the testnet and at the terminal every day. I think there are a lot of people interested to this testnet and how we're going to do that as a whole environment.
Right. Okay.
In terms of tech, I think yeah, we're going to publish more codes and also technology write-ups for people to help people to know us better.
Okay. Now, with regard to the future, Richard, if you wanted to give us some sort of a plan or understanding of the next 6 months, say, for example, what do you foresee with regard to the robustness of the ecosystem? You know, the number of games that will be operating according to what you do know and what is in the pipeline. What do you anticipate, so we can have some sort of more empirical proof at some point that this is beyond just the construction and moves into operation and proof that, you know, games are being played?
Well, that's very simple. I think by the end of this year, which is like in the next 3 to 4 months, we want to see some innovative games growing on Cocos. So other than that, it's all like backstage. For example, we're going to launch our mainnet again, and we're going to further enhance our smart contracts and virtual machine system. And we have already started developing the 2.0, which is to be released probably next year.
Right. Okay. So with regard to future partnerships, do you have anything lined up that you want to hint at? Are there any regions of the world you're really focused on? Because right now, many of the startups are focusing on developing regions to capture the attention of those who perhaps don't even know about the value of blockchain. I mean, what's coming to try and build adoption, both in the enterprise sector and in the user sector?
Well, can I recap your question, please?
Sure. So for the future, for specifically mass adoption, you know, can you tell us some of the things that you're planning out to ensure that you have two parts? That is more of that top-down relationships, more of the partnerships, more business being done, and also more of the fundamental users, so that we know that there's real adoption, you know, planned and potentially proven because of the roadmap that you've built in to achieve it.
So we actually have we have built a international tech support team. So we're going to have two of our advisors, like Edith Young and Chris McCain, recruiting different developers, either like big institutions or like small teams in the North America and the US. And my colleague Kai will support the whole localization of these games, to either convert it to blockchain games or like to build from the scratch. In terms of proving, I think we are trying to help developers prove that, because when we talk about we're going to see some established game before the year end, we're talking about the games with, for example, hundred thousands of daily active users, or like even more. So those are something we're trying to trying to help the developers on.
It makes a lot of sense. Now, Richard, are you going to be helping the marketing of those successful games? Because obviously if they do well, you do well, and that should be a mutually beneficial circumstance. So in the efforts for you to not only push the PR and the marketing for Cocos-BCX, will you be also supporting some of the successful games to also emerge as prominent games of the future?
100%, absolutely. That's what we have been doing for like 10 years as a publisher. So we're gonna definitely help the games, and by helping from different like angles, marketing, internet traffic, purchase, and also a lot of experience sharing, like how to make conversion inside or outside of the game.
Right. Now, obviously, there's a lot that's been happening. You've explained all the different aspects of the business. But if you wanted to talk about the fundamental assets in terms of the features of Cocos-BCX, what would they be in a nutshell? You know, if we honed it down, you know, to finish off in the interview, what are these key points that you really want to push home for the true value of BCX as you now are moving into this open market, moving into the primary market, and you're on exchange and literally trading?
Well, I think probably in one statement, which is a overall solution that encourage the liquidity and free trade of game economy. That's something we're aiming on.
Right. Okay. So there's a lot happening for you, Richard. No doubt, for those who want to understand more, obviously read into it, go into the website and really educate yourself about it. But Rich, when it comes down to the fundamentals, clearly you're confident. Clearly you must feel like you're leading out something. Do you feel like you are situated in the right space, given that you are in Asia, particularly given the compliance and regulatory pressures we see now in different regions? Do you feel ready right now in the current climate we're in to really build this out?
Absolutely. I mean, not just being Asia, because this thing is global, this is digital, this is interconnected. So I think even sitting in anywhere in Asia or anywhere in, for example, North America, we all have access to the global community. So I don't think that's going to be a problem.
Well, I'm talking more about, sorry to interrupt, but I'm talking more about regulation and compliance and the openness and the progressive nature of certain regions. Do you feel like you're situated in a place that is genuinely supportive of blockchain innovation? Because certainly in the US, there's some question marks about how they're going to approach this even now.
Absolutely. Depending on the use case. For example, if the use case is a substitute of a fiat crypto, like a fiat currency, that would be a direct, I wouldn't call that a conflict, but that would be a direct confrontation to the government authority in terms of creating the circulating or like controlling the economy, right? But if we're talking about gaming, when we talk about the blockchain mechanism enable the sustainability of gaming experience, actually it doesn't really have that much conflict with the government regulations. For example, if the government would say, okay, I'm gonna legalize some of the crypto medium, but it has to be under, for example, you have to sacrifice privacy or whatever. Well, that's possible somewhere in the middle for certain industries, because people want their asset to be guaranteed mostly. Yeah, but in some other use case, we would stress on privacy. We would stress on being anonymous. So that's a totally different story.
Right. Okay. Now, a tough question, and this is about distribution as well of the assets themselves in terms of token or wallet addresses. Some of the questions have been raised in Telegram and beyond, so I really want to talk to you about this. Do you feel that there is a fair distribution of the token in those pre-sale and private sale scenarios? And now that you have listed, do you feel that there's also been a fair and transparent process in that time prior to listing when you were raising capital?
Well, absolutely, because there are some of the details, technology details we would recommend noticing. Number one, we're a DPoS chain, so every tokens are pre-created. We're not generating token along the time. So it makes sense that we have a major contract holding the majority percentage. Those are the foundation allocations, unvested investor allocations, and other allocations. And number two, right before we got onto exchanges, the exchange, we actually had probably like 6,000 addresses. And right now it becomes like 7,400. So that means a lot more people are buying and holding, and a lot of people are not even converting their testnet bounty or testnet accounts onto the wallet address. So I think we're in a pretty healthy situation. It's just a matter of what time we're going to switch to the mainnet, and also like by what time we can offer some of the good games so more players can join us. So I think it's more up to us, like how well we can execute everything. Right. So right now I think the token status like fairly reflects the status of us now.
Right. Thanks for addressing that, Rich. Now, with regard to your initial investors, and they are the ones that supported the beginnings of your ecosystem, it's quite understandable that they reap the benefits of that early risk and risk to reward because they supported you from the outset. But are they also definitely locked up for the long term? We ask because now that you are currently in the open market. Binance has listed you. Are there any vulnerabilities we don't know about with regard to those previous investors? And what is that lockup schedule?
So the lockup schedule is fully disclosed on the Binance research. I would also recommend any interested audience to give it a read.
Mm-hmm.
I also want to thank all the investors to our project, private investors, and also later on the public investors who bought on the market. Because we actually got started working with some of our partners, for example, NGC, them are like Neo Global, and also 500 Startups, for example. Their former partner is also our advisor. So yeah, we really learned. We have been learning a lot from them. They are more experienced people in this space. So, we also,
just to jump in there. So, are you confident that they are locked up for a long-term position? That's the main thing I wanted to sort of allude to. Is that, are they able to dump everything now? I just want a bit more transparency on that in this conversation, so we can trust this is a long-term project.
Well, it's fully transparent on Binance research. So again, I would urge any interested person to look at it. And but on the other hand, we believe in the free trade at anyone's free will. So we do have a long-term lockup agreement with every private investors, but we're not gonna talk to them or try to manipulate any price or trying to manipulate or influence their decision. Because by the time we're in this industry, I think respecting and understanding this privacy and free will would be something above everything.
Got it. So yes. Long term, Rich, are you bullish on tokenized economies in the gaming industry? And do you have any comment on other verticals in that context? Because it'd be fascinating to hear from you what you currently think of the way in which the whole crypto market is unfolding. There's so many complexities to it. So I'd love to know, those two sides. Are you bullish on your vertical for the long term? And what do you think of the landscape right now?
Well, I would say I am bullish in terms of most of the rationale about what we're doing has already been validated for like decades. We're not creating new ideas. It's just like, again, moving this trading physical cards to trading digital cards. If you think about that, like some of the prevailing user interfaces like Facebook and, for example, Twitter, they have just been in market for like 10 years or like 15 years. So we're still in a very early stage of digitization of the world, and I'm not surprised if many digitalization is somehow supported by blockchain economy, right?
Right. Okay. So in the future, as a final statement, what's some of the hints, Richard, that's coming for Cocos-BCX? I know you know more than you're giving away. Give us a bit of a hint of what is coming in terms of, announcements, in terms of, something to look forward to for those who really are engaged now and really are beyond even the belief and looking further at the true asset nature of your ecosystem. So they can have a better understanding that you have, a real pipeline of potential, partners and components that are really going to build the infrastructure for the future and to really maintain a stronghold in this marketplace.
Well, I would say in our industry, everything I would recommend is just come check out our games after a period of time, because nothing else would be better than that as a proof. But however, we will have a series of developer tools like tours and the DevCons and also hackathons. So we're gonna make the formal announcement either through our official channels or through our partner channels. So it would be lovely if you guys can join us.
Right. And Richard, are you also going to engage with some, the PR and build out airdrops, for example, or are you doing any incentivization campaigns? Are you working on an ambassador program? What are you doing to really engage the community to make sure they're with you the whole way?
Oh, well, those what you just said are all on the roadmap, but we're going to take step by step. So I think the first step would be like proving ourselves with the mainnet launch again,
Mm-hmm.
and also the release of a couple of games. So to gradually gain our credibility.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the plan. Instead of doing, well, at the same time, we're going to promote absolutely to a global audience.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the nice things we have seen is that starting from last week, we can see a lot of regional communities build up voluntarily, like Turkish. We have Turkish supporters. Thank you very much. And we have a Russian community quite sizable. Spasibo вам. Yeah, we're really excited. Yes.
Right, so clearly they are with you. You've had the good feedback there. So Rich, as a final statement, please take it away. Obviously, it's been quite a long interview, but I do appreciate that. You're not well at the moment. You're about to travel as well. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for sponsoring, my situation and the channel. And once again, thank you for being transparent, because this is what we need in this space. If startups are going to succeed, we need to know from the source that there's a real agenda, there's a real potential, there's a real token, and there's a real economy that you're actually building that has use case. So as a final statement, what would you like to say to all of the people who are interested and intrigued by blockchain gaming platforms?
Yeah, just believe in the blockchain gaming, maybe not to a specific project including Cocos, but believe in gaming, believe in yourselves. That's something we are also confident at.
Absolutely, mate. Well, thank you on behalf of all those who are proponents of blockchain-based gaming, proponents of platforms that really can facilitate this as a global ecosystem. You are leading the way as the co-founder of Cocos-BCX, backed by pre-existing technology. I wish you all the very best. Once again, not to FOMO, not to encourage people to do anything but their own due diligence, but their own research, because this is obviously a very speculative environment, but certainly we are all advocating for real businesses of now and the future. So Richard, thank you again for your time. And hopefully, mate, we can catch up again in months to come when you have even more proof of development, more examples of games, for example, that you can tell us about with proof and even be able to show us, live how these games actually work.
Thank you so much, Brad.
You're very welcome. Take care.